Zelensky will be brooding, but I'll tell you who isn't. Russian President Vladimir Putin. When he invaded Ukraine, a lot of experts were shocked. They felt that Putin had miscalculated, that he would end up being stuck in Ukraine. But Putin was playing the long game. He wasn't just betting on his military might, he was betting on the opposition's weakness. And it has paid off. America has lost interest in defending Ukraine, Europe is a house divided, and Zelensky has lost his charm. So as things stand, it is advantage Putin. It looks like the Russian president will have the last laugh. I'll give you 3 reasons why. Number 1, Putin's main war goal has been met. He wanted to stop Ukraine from joining NATO, and Trump has already agreed to it.
Membership for Ukraine.
They've been saying that for a long time, that Ukraine cannot go into NATO. And I'm okay with that. I just want the war, whether they are or they're not. But it certainly would seem to be that most people have said that that is something that's not going to happen.
Number 2, Putin wanted to carve up Ukraine, to turn it into a broken rump state. Again, things are headed that way. First, he annexed Crimea from Ukraine, that was in 2014, and now in the ongoing war, he's taken over much of eastern Ukraine. Around 20% of the country is occupied by Russia, and it looks like Trump will let Putin keep this territory.
We must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective. Chasing this illusionary goal will only prolong the war and cause more suffering. A durable peace for Ukraine must include robust security guarantees to ensure that the war will not begin again.
And this will have long-term consequences. For example, will the European Union admit a broken Ukraine? Can a rump state grow financially? The answer to both these questions is no. So Putin is creating a weakened state at his border, a state he can meddle in, a state he can order around, and a state he won't have to fear. Number 3 is sanctions relief. There are more than 24,000 sanctions on Russia, 24,000. Out of this, more than 7,000 are by the United States. Putin will want those sanctions lifted, and Trump seems willing. Listen to what his Secretary of State said yesterday.
Sanctions relief going to be involved in any of this normalizing or trying to more level set relationship between the U.S. and Russia? Did the Russians bring up sanctions relief in the meeting today?
Well, sanctions are all the result of this conflict. There are sanctions that were imposed as a result of this conflict. And so I would say to you that in order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are.
This worried U.S. allies in Europe. So Secretary Rubio got on the phone later. He said the sanctions would remain until a deal is struck, which is frankly expected. Putin will never agree to a deal without sanctions relief. So you've ticked 3 objectives. No NATO membership for Ukraine, check. Turn Ukraine into a broken state, check. Commitment to ease sanctions, check. It makes you wonder, has anything gone wrong for Putin? Well, one thing, yes. After his war, 2 countries joined NATO, 2 neutral countries. Finland joined in 2023 and Sweden joined in 2024. Finland shares a massive land border with Russia, and Sweden shares a maritime border. This was certainly a setback to Putin, but his broader goals in Ukraine are on the verge of being fulfilled. And do not think that this is luck. This is long-term strategic planning. Look at what he did with Europe. Europe was always dependent on Russian gas supplies, but Putin built on that. He turned it into leverage for Russia. At the time of invasion, 45% of Europe's gas came from Russia. This allowed them to expand his treasury. It also gave him clout in Europe, especially in countries like Hungary and Serbia. Knowing this, he invaded Crimea in 2014. Putin learned 2 lessons from that operation. 1, the West would only respond diplomatically, not militarily, meaning they would not send troops. And 2, he would have to prepare for sanctions. Putin built alternatives to Western services and goods, even symbolic ones like McDonald's. As a result, the impact of sanctions has been limited. And it shows in the GDP numbers. Look at these numbers. Russia's economy grew by 3.6% in 2023. and a projected 4% in 2024. Compare this to G7 nations. Their combined average in 2024 was 1.7%. Russia may not have completely beaten the sanctions, but it did survive the worst. And a big reason for that is Putin's pivot to Asia. In the last decade, he expanded his relations with China. He built a personal equation with Xi Jinping. He bought military drones from Iran, visited North Korea to meet Kim Jong-un, and he continued his warm ties with India. The only thing he could not control was the US election result. So when Donald Trump won, Putin must have been thrilled. He knows how to sway this US president, whether it's by praising his personality or echoing his lies on the 2020 election. Listen to this.
The pre-election period has been difficult for Mr. Trump in every way. He and even members of his family were constantly under severe pressure. There were even attempts on his life. But he showed the courage to win a convincing manner. I can't disagree with Trump that if he was president, if his victory was not stolen in 2020, then maybe there would not be the crisis in Ukraine that arose in 2022.
So Putin is sitting pretty. Knowing him, he won't be celebrating yet, not until a proper deal is struck. But he certainly made one thing clear to the world: never write off Vladimir Putin.